An easy way to understand modern politics is to know that most people on the right think most people on the left aren't necessarily bad, they're just a bit stupid and naive and brainwashed by the contemporary culture. They tend to live in this utopian ideology and search for this mad equality which makes them think they're morally superior to everyone else. But when they think of people who disagree with them, they don't just think we're wrong and stupid, they actively tend to think we're evil. I first started to notice this around a decade ago when the EDL was in full swing. Now I don't agree with everything the EDL did, but at the time I did start to look into what they were complaining about. And I remember at the time the mainstream line was, these people just hate Muslims because they're different and they're evil and toxic and white. And at the time I remember thinking, well that's pretty horrible, but the more you look into it you realise there were actually legitimate claims of concern there, things such as grooming gangs we now know them as, terror and so forth. These turned out to be real issues. Now you could say that the mainstream was ignoring the grooming gangs and so forth for the sake of Muslims, but I believe it's something a bit deeper. What they're really protecting is their utopian view of the world. I remember this same dynamic functioning when Donald Trump got in America. I was working in London at the time and women in the office were actually crying. I remember thinking at the time, we don't even live in America and nothing in your life is going to change. But once you understand what's really affected is their psychological understanding of the world, you see why they get so upset. This is why after the recent riots up and down the country, you get leftist idiots like Paul Mason stating, in case it's not obvious, from the moment Labour took office, the far right have been looking for street confrontations with minority communities and refugees. It's clearly organised and it's likely manipulated by foreign powers. It's actually quite impressive how we can hover over reality and not even look at it in the face. He doesn't even mention the murder of 3 little girls. He doesn't even mention the fact that this has been bubbling over years and years after people being ignored and sick of mass migration and endless asylum seekers while being told that we're evil simply for wanting to maintain our way of life. This is why the main takeaway from recent events, both from the liberal media and our government, is about the violent disorder and thuggery, quote-unquote, that's taken place in the protests after the fact. Here's Yvette Cooper stating that she and Keir Starmer are going to be working on cracking down on any protests and riots in the future. But as Carl Benjamin points out, if you've got any free time after that, could you also spare a moment or two to consider how to prevent colonisers from stabbing our children to death, please? But of course they don't seem so fussed about children being stabbed and grooming gangs and so forth, because that doesn't affect their multicultural utopian ideology. What does is when people protest against it, that's what they really don't like. They really believe that the average British person just wants to hold hands and sing "Don't Look Back" in anger and then forget about it all. They seem to genuinely think that the only problem here is the so-called far right, that we don't have major structural issues in our country to do with multiculturalism and the amount of people coming here. Yet while they go off in their utopian fancyland, they ignore things like this. This is a Kurdish asylum seeker pushing a postman into the London Underground just a couple of days ago. Now I can't play you the actual video because YouTube will take this video down, but the postman's crying for being pushed on the tracks. He looked at the asylum seeker badly, allegedly. Now there have been so many stabbings going on recently that this has barely even made the news. Did the government even know about it? Have they spoke about it? Do they even care? And then on top of this, the government and the establishment media will come out and tell you to be careful of disinformation, and by all means we should be careful of disinformation. We should try and verify everything before we say it out loud. However, they'll put people forward like Hugh Edwards to warn us about this.
One note of caution: always be careful. It's important to check all the sources. They might not be giving you the full picture, or they might have made, an innocent mistake.
This is the same Hugh Edwards, by the way, that the BBC knew was under investigation for very serious child sex offences, yet still gave him a pay rise and didn't tell the public. But again, they don't see any problem with any of it because none of that challenges their utopian ideology. What does is people who question the media, question the government, and question the wisdom of mass migration and multiculturalism. It seems to me a major split is happening in the UK. In the 80s, you could say you had the socialists and the Thatcherites, and though they massively disagreed, I don't doubt that many of those old school northern socialists loved the UK, just as the conservative side did too. Nowadays, it seems that one side does still love the country, but the other side loves a utopian, globalist ideology. I honestly don't know if that split is recoverable anymore. The Labour Party are ripping it far and wide. I believe this is the beginning of a new world. It's the end of Blairism. We're likely to see sectarianism and balkanisation in the future. And remember, the blood is on their hands. As much as they try and blame you, it started and ended with them. Anyway, these are just some of my thoughts. Do let me know what you think down below. Do consider subscribing to the channel.